Hello and welcome everybody to the Virtual Science Cafe. So good to have you with us here in our virtual space. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or over on Facebook, welcome to the show. I'm your host. My name is Chris Smith, curator for the Daily Planet Theater at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, everybody's favorite place in downtown Raleigh, right? If you're going to downtown Raleigh, it's to come visit us at the museum, which I'll remind everybody, you can actually do right now. The museum is open. You'll just need to head to naturalsciences.org and sign up for one of those free timed tickets, and then come and see all the great exhibits and galleries that we've got open and available for you right now. So museum's open, come and see us. You may even see me there waving at the front doors, depending on when you come and visit. So do that. But right now, we're going to talk about science, technology, engineering, mathematics, bringing you STEM learning right here in what I hope is an informal, relaxed environment. So I hope that wherever you are watching, you're relaxed. Maybe you've got a drink, you got some snacks, and you're ready to take in a great show. Before we get to the program, I want to remind everybody that there are some exciting things happening coming out of the museum this weekend and next week. So this Friday and Saturday, November 13 and 14, is Darwin Days. Now, normally Darwin Days is a Saturday in November, and we invite everybody out to the museum by the thousands to meet exhibitors, scientists, hear presentations from researchers, and we sort of dive into how researchers are continuing to explore and learn more about and expand upon the ideas put forward by Charles Darwin, right? These sort of foundational principles to biology and ecology. We can't do that in person this year, so everything is virtual, which also means that we can expand our program offerings. So Friday and Saturday, beginning at 9 a.m., you can join us for virtual presentations and like breakout sessions all day, both days. Naturalsciences.org, look for the Darwin Day link, and that's where you can sign up to get all of the information, and every program is free. So scroll through the programs and find the one that you like. Sign up for all of them even, and we'll see you Friday and Saturday. And then next Tuesday, the 17th, we have the STEM Showcase for students with disabilities. Sign up for that one too. Of course, it's free. We'll actually be hosting that event. You can join us right here on YouTube for that one. We'll have great guest speakers, breakout sessions where students can actually meet role models and get inspired. And that is next Tuesday. Again, all this information, check out the virtual events calendar at naturalsciences.org. I think that was all of the housekeeping that I needed to do. So I can move on to introducing tonight's special guest. Now, tonight's guest comes to us from a partnership with the folks with the City of Raleigh in the Connect Raleigh group. Connect Raleigh works with the museum. You've probably heard of this group before because they work with us to do trivia nights and have lots of programs throughout the year at the museum. It's been so great to have them on board working with us. Many thanks to them for connecting us at the museum with James Alberque. Jim is the GIS and Emerging Technology Manager for the City of Raleigh. And it's always exciting to meet some of the people who are helping us live better lives here in the Triangle. So Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Very exciting to hear about some of the programming you have coming up.
Yeah, a lot of really cool stuff going on. And we can do so much of it because we have technology.
Yes. Yeah, so, I'm joining you from my living room. I would love to be joining you in person at the theater, but unfortunately, given the times we're in, but it is amazing that we're able to leverage this technology and still operate the way we used to and do events like this. It's interesting, 9 months ago, the team, we went from going to work every day to working from home. And we talk frequently that there was very little disruption in that. And it's amazing, that we were able to do this and take advantage of the technology that's available to us.
That's great stuff. Keep the City of Raleigh going, right?
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, let's jump right in. Everybody, sit back, relax, get ready to learn. And Jim, when you're ready, the show is yours.
Excellent. Okay. So Chris, again, thanks for the introduction. My name is Jim Alberque. I'm the GIS and Emerging Technology Manager with the city. I get the opportunity to manage a couple of really great groups. I manage the web team. I manage a small group of emerging technology folks, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the piece that I'm going to talk about today is the GIS side. So GIS is Geographic Information Systems, and it's how we use location data, spatial technology, geography, and geometry to help support the city's operation and share information with citizens. So location. So I'm a GIS guy. I believe in it. You know, it's part of who I am. There's very little in the world that I think that maps would not help. There are a few problems that I think that maps couldn't at least lend a hand in understanding. And so, you know, what they say is a large percentage of data is location based. Some of the sales folks from a lot of the mapping technology companies say 80% of all data is either directly or indirectly location based. I'm not sure I buy the 80%, but what I would encourage you to do is think about what you did today and some of your interactions you had with friends, family, coworkers, conversations that you had, and just think about those subjects and think about how many of them are location related, and either directly or indirectly. And so when I think of my day today, you know, I drop my kid off at a bus stop and walk the dog, talk to my wife about picking up some tile. All of those things are location-based information. And so, you know, location is a really interesting integration opportunity, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But all of those things I just mentioned, if you put them on a map, you can overlay them and see patterns across data and through data. And I think, you know, that's the thing that gets us excited at the City of Raleigh and using GIS technology, and that's how we do it. And then maps help set context. So, you know, if the folks on the call are anything like me, when you see a map, you immediately orient yourself to what is going on. And I have a couple of stories later that I'd like to tell you about, but immediately you understand where you are and the things around you, and they help to frame what you're looking at. So maps are, you know, obviously very important, but they are permeating our lives even more than they had in the past. So there are some major events happening in the world, and maps are some of the ways that this information is shared. And so, you know, there are a few websites that I go to on a daily, weekly basis where I go and I look at information. And that information affects how decisions I make about me and my family and how I, you know, live my life. And it's really powerful to be able to show data in that way. You know, I don't have a ginormous brain, so I'm lucky that this maps stimulate both sides of my brain. I often need to be using both sides of my brain to think about problems. And so there's the creative side and then the analytical side. And maps and charts and graphs, those generally kind of talk to both of those things. And then the last thing is that they lend, they allow you to make sense of complex data. So, you know, the data on the screen right now, while that's not complex data, it's massive amounts of data. That is big data. There's a lot of information that's being shared there. And so it helps to kind of simplify data. And then it, you know, as I mentioned, you know, many of us are making decisions about what we're seeing on these maps on a daily, weekly basis. So again, they help us to make sense of what's going on in our world. So another thing maps are really good at is a temporal view of kind of the world. And I have a few examples of this later, but you know, what what did the world look like before today, before last year, before 100 years ago? Maps are a great way to show what things used to be like. In the city, we often look at current conditions and future conditions. So what does the world look like now? And can we share information about what is happening in our community using maps? And then the future is, can we share a vision of what the world may, can, or might look like in the future? And this is, when we talk about projects in the city or initiatives in the city, maps are a great way to share internally around concepts and ideas, and share with citizens around vision and outcomes. And, this is a place where I have a couple of stories. There is nothing more natural than when you look at a map, kind of orienting yourself to where you are. So I've worked for the City of Raleigh for 7 years. And prior to that, I worked in the city of Boston. And so there was a gentleman, the mayor of Boston was Mayor Menino. And so we would make maps all the time for initiatives and projects. And you would roll out these long poster-sized maps, and he would immediately look at Hyde Park, which was the neighborhood he lived in, on the street he lived on. And so there is nothing more natural than that to do when you see a map. And so what we would do is when we were making this, we would always a bunch of us would stand around and look at that spot on the map and make sure that was presenting the information that we wanted. When we put together not just maps, but applications, if there's an address bar, I will put in addresses of the folks I know who will look at it, because I know as soon as I share it with them, they're going to put in their own address and learn about the things around their house. And that's really interesting. That's how this data, this presentation layer becomes personal to folks, and how they kind of interpret data. So here's some examples. I'm going to go through some examples of how we use maps in the city. So as I said, future, looking at the future, we use maps to share ideas around initiatives and projects. And this is a great way to do it. If you do it well, it's a great way to provide a large information in a kind of digestible way. And so, if you look on our website, you will see tons of examples of how we're using maps for initiatives and projects. So at the beginning, I had talked about where using maps as an integration platform. One of the other things you can do is you can use maps in conjunction with analytics. And so you can start to aggregate some of that big data. So I was showing an example of some of the coronavirus testing rates at an earlier slide. That's just aggregating data. And we do that frequently in the city. So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of my other roles is merging technologies. And that includes the instrumentation of our city. So there are plenty of sensors. There are very few assets that we can now get that don't have these sensors. So these sensors are kind of putting off what we call a digital exhaust, some sort of a signature that's reporting status, location, temperature, all sorts of measurements. And so if we start to ingest that data and process that data, we can use that data and aggregate it and then display it using maps. And again, we can take advantage of all of the good things about the presentation layer being able to resonate with readers, etc. So another thing that you can do with maps is you can provide some storytelling, and this can be storytelling through data. And so this is an example of, this is scooter trips. So looking at a month of time of scooter trips, you start to see a story. And the interesting thing is that this is data, and it tells a story about who's using these scooters where. but it also represents, each one of these trips represent somebody getting on a scooter and going to a destination. And so, you know, sometimes I start to think about these people and what they're doing and what they're doing with their lives, and why are they going from here to there, and why did they choose scooter versus walking. And so it's a really interesting way to present data. And if you're willing to, you can kind of get lost in thinking through this data and what it means. So again, I had mentioned that we have a lot of sensors and IoT, and so one of the things that we're doing is we're using that data with real-time implications. So these sensors are reporting data in real time, and so we're trying to ingest this data and start to process it to not just react, but also understand what's happening right now, in the city. And something interesting that's happening is that consumer applications, big, large-scale consumer applications, are now starting to expose some of their data. So for instance, in this example, the pink barricade buttons represent jam reports from Waze. So we're able to kind of ingest that data and kind of integrate it with our scooter information and our automated vehicle location of our fleet, and some live traffic information, and potentially camera information, etc. And this starts to get folks some visibility, some practitioners visibility into data that they never had available to them before. And it's really an exciting opportunity, and it, as well as a challenge. The challenge is that there is a vast amount of data that's flying at the city quickly, and one of the roles of my group is to try and help make sense of that, which is a challenge. It's a challenge that we're excited to try and tackle. So another thing that we're working on, which I think is more on the emerging technology side, is the idea of a digital twin. So a digital twin is a digital sandbox environment in which you can, in theory, test scenarios that could be applied to the real world. And so there's all sorts of applications of this. You know, you see this in industrial applications, whether you're talking about widgets or industrial facilities, et cetera, and trying to understand applying pressure and temperature and those sorts of things to widgets, how they'll react. And we've kind of applied it to the urban landscape to say, hey, if we have a 3D digital environment, can we use that as this digital twin where we can start to look at, in a dynamic way, whether it be development patterns or, you know, we're not quite there yet, but we're looking at, can we start to apply models to this? Can we model not just physical environments, but potentially human movement, et cetera, tree canopy coverage, carbon sequestration, that sort of thing. A little bit more on the kind of emerging cutting edge side, but we're definitely looking. One of the projects that we're doing that's really, really interesting, we're not doing it, but a research firm is doing it, is looking at some of the micro environments around wind to see what would be the effect of development on drone flight paths. Really fascinating stuff, and you know, interested to see what comes out of that. So I wanted to talk through some of the applications that we're kind of putting out that you may or may not be aware of, that are publicly facing and I think have kind of real good value for folks from a data discovery perspective. So the first is called iMAPS. So iMAPS is a property research application. It's a partnership with the city and the county. And so the City of Raleigh developed the code and wrote the code and supports the technology, and the county provides data for the application, as well as help desk support for users who have issues. And so this is This is a big, large-scale application that has been around for years. So I've been with the city for 7 years. It predated me. Just the first iteration, we've kind of revamped it a couple of times from a technology perspective. And it's fantastic for learning about property and things that affect property and doing property research. And so it's pretty easy. It's maps.raleighnc.gov. It has a pretty large user base, as you can see, 1.7 million page views a year, which from our perspective is pretty decent sized. And it has become, kind of a Swiss Army knife for data discovery using maps. So it's got 75 layers in there from not just Raleigh, but because we're partnering with the county, has all sorts of information about surrounding communities, whether it be Fuquay, Varina, Knightdale, Cary, etc., where you can learn about floodplains and zoning and police districts, council districts, etc. So really powerful application. The next one, which is a little bit more consumer-based, is this idea of a park locator. So if you go to maps.raleighnc.gov/park locator, it is a location-based park amenity discovery tool. So we partnered with our Parks Department to put this together, and it's really great. I haven't seen a ton of applications in other cities that kind of mimic this capability or functionality. And so when you go there, you can actually, if you're on your phone, you can click Find Me, and if you allow, it will just find where you are. And then you can kind of go through some of the amenities in parks and say, hey, I'm here and I'm looking for a dog park. And it will list the parks that have that facility and list them in the order from the distance from you, and then provide directions as well as what other facilities or amenities are at that particular park, as well as getting a link to the classes that are available at that park. Really exciting, very powerful tool, and a real definition of how GIS can be leveraged to provide good services to citizens. And then the last one I wanted to kind of talk through is more on the transparency side. So open data is a movement across the country, and it's been a movement for many, many years. And it's not just a city-driven function, it's also community-based. And so we partnered with some community groups around this. And it's a way to discover, download, and integrate with some of our data sets. So we have, I believe we have about 80 data sets on this, and they're everything from permits to crime to greenways. So there's all sorts of data. And for the data that's not static, so if you think about permits or crime, we have processes in place that make sure that that data kind of stays up to date. And so it's refreshed, whether it be, every 20 minutes or every hour. And so this is a place where you can get access to some of the data that a lot of people are really looking for. So one other thing is sometimes you use GIS and map-based or location-based technology, and you don't even know that you're integrating with it. So an example is on our homepage, right in the middle of the homepage, I don't know if anybody's ever noticed it, there's an address lookup, and you can type in your address, and basically it provides a list of all of the services or representatives for that particular address. And so what's happening on the back end is it is dynamically in real time, as you put in your address and then hit the enter button, it is basically dropping or geocoding that address and then dropping it through a number of these polygons to see where it falls. Again, really powerful set of capabilities. And so it is dynamic. So if I went in and changed the data today, the next person who put in their address would be a consumer of that updated information. And this is really exciting, and we think is a really good capability on the public-facing website. So lastly, I wanted to plug GIS Day. So, we're mapping technology folks and map nerds, and we get together on November 18th, and we have a great program kind of scheduled for adults. And then we also have a track for children, and it's on November 18th. And you can learn about how not just the city, but we've invited some public sector folks private sector folks to come in and talk about how they use mapping technology, whether it be in engineering, et cetera. We've also invited some folks from the state and from the county, as well as obviously for the kids track, that's kind of led by Wake County Public Schools. We're really excited. It's happening November 18, and you can register at the link right there, GIS Day. RaleighNC.gov/GIS-Day. So a lot of those things I showed, I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to the team. This is the team that actually makes all this stuff happen. I'm very lucky to be able to work with these folks. They have the right mix of kind of capabilities and passion. And that passion is for not just the underlying technology, but to deliver great services. And so really excited, really grateful for the opportunity to work with these folks. And then this is just to kind of highlight, I showed a very kind of razor thin slice of what we're working on. We're working on everything from just managing addresses in the city to, trying to pilot video analytics. So really excited about all of these things, and a lot of stuff coming out of the group. So yeah, that's the presentation. Thanks so much for your time, and I'd love to talk more about it.
All right. Excellent stuff, Jim. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I mean, it's really impressive to see how all of this data comes together, but so much more impressive to see how easy it can be to use, right? How easy you and your team make these platforms to use, so that, all you have to do is know your address and you can get access to incredible amounts of data from, who your representatives are all the way out to, when the next 500, if you're in a 500-year floodplain or something like that.
Yeah, so it's something that we talk about in the group. It's interesting. There's two things. There's two forces that we think are at work here. One is the technology, and we are pushing that technology. So we're trying to do exactly what you just described, make it easier for folks to do, to make it seamless for them. So that's one force. This other force is outside of our control, which is consumer grade applications. So you are interacting with Amazon and Google's all the time, and they are providing phenomenal spatial technology. And so our customers are expecting that same experience from the City of Raleigh. And so our job is to try and provide at least that same level of location-based, right? Which is it's a lot of pressure, and it's good. We hope we're a little bit ahead of that, but it is it's an interesting thing that's happening in the world.
I'll remind everybody watching, you can use the chat box or the comment thread if you're on YouTube or Facebook to leave your thoughts and questions, and we'll be getting to those in just a moment. I'll give folks a minute to get to typing and getting their questions input before we start to grab stuff. But it's cool. Somebody's already said GIS is cool. GIS is cool. I was fortunate during my graduate studies. We spent a whole year, 2 semesters learning GIS technology. And that's just like 9 months on it. It's just barely scratching the surface of what's out there and available. But even then, it's fun to just make a map, to bring data together, and you get a cool map. And, we were doing cool stuff like, looking for trees in North Carolina, or mapping lion habitat in Africa, stuff because you're in classes, what you do, right? You have fun. But I'm always amazed when I see such great maps that are so easy to read, because having dipped my toe in it, it's hard to make a pretty map. It's really difficult to make a pretty map.
I would agree. So there's a great presentation on that two cartographers put together on the 2016 election data results. And they had an hour where they just went through probably 50 examples of the same exact data. Some very, very poor examples, some really great examples. And you're right there, while I think our group is really good at it, there's always opportunities to improve. They call it information design. There's always opportunities to improve information design and make sure that you're presenting that information in a legible and inviting way.
So now another thing that interests me is this open data. What kind of information is there for anybody to get their hands in?
Great question. So when we put together the open data site, 5 or 6 years ago, really we were talking about high value data. What is the data that when we get FOIA requests or when we talk to constituents in community groups, what is the data that they're most interested in? And, you come across a couple of items that just kind of keep coming up. And those things include crime, permits, property values, etc. So those are the things that we kind of targeted. And then there's a bunch of stuff that we include on there that is that we have that we think is valuable to folks that maybe they may not know that they want. So that includes, a lot of spatial data. So building footprints and driveways and roads, etc. But one thing that we are doing is we're trying to keep, we have a form on the website, which is if you don't see data on the website, on the open data site that you're interested in, shoot us a note and we'll kind of add it to a list to see, how hard it would be to expose that data.
Let's talk about something that I remember learning a lot about: colors and using different colors on maps. Now, you're probably thinking this is a dumb question. Chris has got a dumb question. But like you could make a park on a map red, but instead you make it green. So how do you and your team go through and decide all of these small details that influence the way people perceive the information that's there? Right, like I'm thinking if you marked a new development in downtown Raleigh with lots of like dark red colors, even if it's a grocery store that's going to serve a new neighborhood, maybe it's something that a community needs, right? If it's red on a map, it could turn people off to it versus a park being green.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this is kind of the right side of your brain, part of the equation. And so there's a couple of colors. There's green and red, which they're not off limits by any stretch, but they have connotations to them. So that's one. So when we use them, we're very thoughtful about how we use them. That's one. Two is software has come a long way. So sometimes software suggests colors. Interestingly enough, it suggests color. It starts to do some machine learning and AI and says, hey, I know based on the pattern of this data that this is likely property data. And so therefore, I'm going to make it a lighter shade of some color and make it kind of fade into the background, etc. So that's two. And then three is we try as much as we can to do peer reviews on products and maps. So we ask for other folks to review any maps that we put together. And we're fairly critical of each other and provide feedback. And there's often industry standards around colors. So parks has an industry standard. Land use has an industry, residential buildings on a map are always, the same colorish.
Interesting stuff. Okay. Questions have rolled in here now. What is the most popular public-facing application?
So that iMAPS application is by far our most popular application that we offer. It is only behind our public facing website by a little bit. It's interesting. If we ever have any issues with the application itself, we have systems that monitor whether it's up or working. We often get phone calls before the systems determine that the system went down. So
Oh, wow,
it is, yeah. So it is part of the, so we're redoing that site. We're actually talking about redoing the site completely. And the interesting thing about the site is a lot of folks use it, not just to use it, as part of their economic development process, right? They use it as part of their business. So if we don't do it right, we could potentially disrupt somebody's ability, to carry out their business, and something that we take pretty seriously because it's property research, real estate, deed companies, all those folks use that application on a daily, if not hourly basis.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, do you know who's accessing this data the most?
And so we only know it through feedback. We don't know, we know analytics about how many folks are using it and where they're coming from. I mean, obviously they're all coming from the greater Wake County area, but we don't know exactly what they're doing with it outside of just, the normal research. But we do know through who's calling the help desk, who calls us when the application doesn't work right. If we add a new feature, who do we get feedback from? So, you get a lot of the folks who are kind of around the real estate industry who are using it. That's one. We have it baked into a lot of our permitting processes. So if you want to, pull a permit in the city, sometimes we ask if you don't have a CAD drawing, you can provide a map kind of printed from iMAPS. So, yeah.
How do you stay abreast of developments in GIS?
It's hard. It's hard. So we take professional development very seriously in the group, just because it is so fast moving that what we do is all of the team members are tasked with attending some sort of a professional development activity once a month. And then during our weekly team meeting, report back to the group about what they learned at that professional development event. And again, I mentioned the team is awesome. They have an insatiable appetite to learn more, and they get really excited about some of the stuff that is on the kind of the cusp of what's coming down the line on the technology side. And to be honest, we're all a little competitive, right? And when we look around the country, we look at how other cities and towns are using this technology, and we will, if we see somebody doing something before us, it starts to motivate us. So
Yeah, sure. I'm sure it's the same thing in the museum community.
Yeah.
They see the Science Cafe and they go, why aren't we doing that?
I agree. I'm taking the Science Cafe back to my group.
There you go.
This is good stuff. This is good
stuff. Collaboration.
Yes.
Synergy.
Yes.
You mentioned at the very beginning of the talk that you worked on similar things in Boston for quite a while. How does what I think of as a real big city compared to the challenges or benefits of using these technologies in a much smaller place like Raleigh?
So I remember coming to the interview in Raleigh and thinking exactly the way you were thinking. Hey, I've done all this. I know all this stuff. I'm here to kind of show you how to do it. And I was lucky enough to get hired by the city, and got here and learned that Raleigh and North Carolina in general is at the forefront of GIS and GIS technology. Like they were doing things. They had kind of collaborated across organizations like nothing I had ever seen. So the partnership between Raleigh and Wake County is it's built on concrete. It was a concrete foundation of collaboration before I got here. I can take no credit for that, and it's amazing what that allows us to do. The state has really mature governance and organizational structure around how they set policies around GIS and how they guide cities and towns and local governments. My predecessors in Raleigh had made big investments in GIS and GIS technology, and we're more organized than I could have imagined. Really impressive stuff happening in Raleigh. And again, I don't want to take too much credit for this, but I think we are close to leading. We're leading the country at this point. We're and again, that group that I showed in that last slide, we're doing. We work with the software vendors that we work with. They are reaching out to us to say, hey, we have this new thing, and we know that Raleigh is interested in doing this. So we'd love to partner with you to prove out this technology. So that gives us a whole bunch of opportunities to pilot projects and technology and test things out. And there's a couple of reasons for that, I think. One is, I think just the city leadership is supportive of this. They are supportive to say, hey, go ahead and get in that R&D space and learn about things, especially if the software community is willing to do it at no cost, right? We're helping them learn about their technology. It's this great collaboration there. That's one. Two is the community seems to be supportive of it. And three is the team that I mentioned. They have capacity and capability to do these things.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's
just great stuff all around for everybody.
It is. It's great. It's exciting.
All right. Glenn wants to know, are you using OpenGIS or a proprietary system?
So we are good. Another good question. So we are using a proprietary system. So we're using this technology called Esri technology. And there are some pockets in the city that are using some open source technologies, whether it be QGIS or there's this other thing. So because of the way that GIS is being developed, it used to be strictly, I'm sure, Chris, when you were using it, you were using desktop tools, right? So you were using the software that you would use on your desktop. There's really this movement to more kind of either cloud-based technology or kind of a mixed local and cloud-based technology where you're using code. And so there's a bunch of folks in the city using kind of open source technologies to do on-the-fly mapping, some really interesting things, with things like Python, JavaScript, etc.
What are the best websites for exploring GIS topics?
That is a good. So Twitter, so that's, you were asking earlier how we keep up with things. That's another, I didn't even mention that, Twitter is a way that I am able to keep my finger on the pulse of things. And there's a couple of really smart folks that, there's a ton of smart folks that are constantly churning out really provocative content around whether it be data and data analytics or mapping and cartography. And so, that's where those are the things that I'm looking at. There's on the cartography side, you were talking about colors and things. There's a group called, I think it's called NACIS, the North American Cartographic Society. And, they have the super cartographic nerds in there, and they're doing incredible stuff around just data presentation. And they are getting so deep into colors and fonts and line widths and line weights and those sorts of things, labeling, that are, when you get to it, they are very, very, very important things. But if you could just kind of sit and learn from them, in theory, my mapping got better by a half an inch by just kind of reading a few of their blogs. So.
All right, let's see. How could someone pursue a career in GIS? What's the skill set or other technical know-hows?
So we are on our team, we're pretty technology heavy. So when we're thinking about onboarding folks, we're trying to gauge their experience, either experience with technical tools or ability to learn technical tools. Because the landscape is so dynamic, it's impossible to be kind of proficient with all of these tool sets. And so, for us, it is demonstration. So have you demonstrated that you can leverage kind of spatial technology? That's one. Two, for us, team is important. So are you a good fit for the team? Are you, those things that I mentioned, are you passionate about what you're doing? Or are you, punching the clock and going home? And so those sorts of things are really important. And then the thing that we talk about all the time when we're interviewing folks is curiosity. Are they curious? Are they, right? Do they have a kind of an appetite for learning?
Excellent stuff. So I'm just kind of curious, what would be like, what's something that's stood out to you? You're looking at the data or you're looking at maps that have come out of the data and you went, well, now that's interesting. Something that you wouldn't have thought about or that jumped out at you that just was a head scratcher or caught your interest.
That is a great question.
Something interesting or.
Yeah, there's always things. So a conversation that I have frequently when we're putting together these web maps, we call them web maps. So these are these maps that you can interact with that include analysis. So recently, internally, we put together something around we did what's called a suitability analysis. So we tried to analyze the city to find out where the most suitable locations for EV charging were. Right. So you take a bunch of data, you sit around to a table and you say, hey, what data should be considered for locating EV chargers? And so when you come up with this list and then you weight them and then you run this kind of model to create the suitability analysis. And then the interesting thing for me, the thing that's most interesting is to meet with the folks who you sat around the table with around the data and look at the results. Because everyone who was sat at the table had an idea of what the city should have looked like for EV charging suitability. They just all had a mental picture. And so I always want to match to say, hey, does this what you thought it was going to be? And so it's fascinating. You find these pockets where you're just like, oh, that's weird. I didn't expect this area to light up, that it was not a good fit for EV charging stations or vice versa. You always find these little pockets, and sometimes it's because I'm not as familiar with all of the city as I could be. And so it's a learning opportunity for me where, somebody who I'm sitting with will be like, oh, the reason that that's the case is because of, all of the young people that are moving into that neighborhood or whatever it is. You're like, oh, I didn't know that neighborhood was changing in that way. So
I'm going to give the last question to Dan here. Best guess, where is GIS in 20 years?
So
it's implanted in your brain.
Exactly. I mean, it is implanted in everything, that it is so seamless. It is completely integrated into everything that you do. That, I'm a map guy, so I'm always gonna, as I started with, there's very little that I don't think map or spatial thinking can benefit from. So, I don't know about on your smartphone, but Google Maps is probably my most frequent application that I use today. And so I anticipate a lot of that functionality starting to get integrated into all of those other applications. So it's not Google Maps, it's kind of integrated. I mean, it actually already is. I mean, it's already integrated into a lot of our kind of experiences. I'll tell you this, the story is I need tile. I'm tiling my bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked for tile. And it said, hey, do you like this tile? And I said, yeah. And they said, good, because it's at the store 4 miles down the street. Right. And so I was like, oh, okay. You have integrated my location and the tile location and the directions and all of that into an experience that had nothing to do with maps at all. And it was completely seamless to me. It wasn't even scary to me. I wasn't even freaked out by it. And it is, so that when we were talking earlier about the expectation, that is consumers' expectation now. So that's the pressure that people in the GIS community are feeling is that really smart people at Google and Apple and Amazon and Facebook, they're integrating this stuff into their consumer grade applications. And so, yeah, I see more of that.
Well, I think building off of that it's great that the city of Raleigh, being a governmental entity with responsibilities to citizens and the people who live in the city, can use similar tools to do things like find a park instead of maybe relying on the Google. I remember when I moved out, I live just outside of the Central Triangle area, and there aren't a lot of parks like there would be, in walking distance from downtown Raleigh, say. So you hit the Google looking for things, but it's kind of hard to figure out where stuff is even, getting outside of the grid of a city, perhaps, or where services become less close together, I guess. But that somebody in Raleigh could know, the city knows where all the parks are. They know better than anybody where all the parks are, and they know better than anybody what's happening at each of those parks that's good for me, my family, and my friends to participate in. So I'm going to hit them up for that information because it's literally at their fingertips, whereas Google and Apple have to go searching for it and then integrate it. But Jim knows where it's all happening right now. So let's go ask Jim. So I think and it gets people outside in parks, which is good from the museum because that's what we like to do.
Yes.
Is get people outside in nature.
So something exciting that you just reminded me of is, so you just described this way that the city becomes the data source of kind of authoritative data, right? And right. So people can come to the city and learn about those things. So, this is in alignment with where are things in 20 years, but I'd love for everybody to come to the city of Raleigh to learn about, to come to our website to learn about their part, blah, blah, blah. That's just not where they are sometimes. Sometimes they're at the Googles and Wazes and whatever. So one of the things that you're seeing is this movement where those organizations are partnering with cities to say, hey, I'm Waze, I give turn-by-turn directions, that's what I do. You guys dig up roads and close streets. That's really, really important to us. Can you, in some real-time way, share that information with us so that we can then provide a superior service to your citizens and our customers, right? And so, Raleigh and, a bunch of other communities signed up for Connected Communities program to do just that. And so that is, the idea is to meet people where they are. I'd love for them to come to the City of Raleigh website to learn about that stuff, but they're not. They're at Waze, they're at, Map My Ride, whatever those things are. So let's push our data to those kind of platforms.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
So Chris, I got a question for you.
I'm ready.
So where is GIS going to be in 20 years?
I'll just blink and there'll be a map, right? I can just think of where I need to go and it'll be like a heads up display telling me, which way to turn. How about that?
It's
a contact lens.
Yep.
With heads-up display directions. You know where, honestly, what I really think is that for me and what I'm interested in, which is wildlife conservation, nature, communicating the importance of those things to the public, it's going to be using all of these tools and making them granular and getting the resolution down to a scale where somebody in their own community can learn more about the nature that's around them. And we see this being used in tools like iNaturalist, which is a free application where people can take a photo of a plant, animal, fungus, any living thing, and then upload it to the iNaturalist map. And once the app can identify what you saw, or you can tell it if you know what the identification is, but then it gets that georeference location. It gets that GPS point that then researchers, scientists can use in order to track the distribution of species. Well, the better that these tools get, the more I would be able to look at data in my neighborhood and say, oh, wow, on the roadsides in Orange County, there's actually a large population of endangered sunflowers. Maybe I should talk to DOT in Orange County about what it means to mow the roadsides, or what it means to mow a park versus leaving part of it to go to native prairie, or the benefits of boosting plant and animal populations in little bitty tiny wetlands. It wasn't too long ago, we had a guest, I think from City of Raleigh too, who talked about the importance of very small wetlands, like a tiny pond in somebody's backyard that nobody ever pays any attention to, or that's at on some community land or city or state-owned land that nobody ever thinks of. But all of these tiny things add up to deliver us great services like clean air, clean water, and those sorts of things that we all need and that are great. So using these tools to build our connection to nature and the environment, and to do it at a very small scale where I as an individual can connect to what's around me, that sounds like a great future for GIS in my view.
That's fascinating.
And the City of Raleigh is helping do it.
Yeah.
We got people who are thinking about it and who are working on it and using the tools and techniques available to them to make it go.
Yeah.
And putting
Definitely.
it at everybody's fingertips. So, Jim, thank you. This has been a great conversation.
Chris, thanks so much for your time. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Everybody, you can head to raleighnc.gov/GIS-DAY, GIS Day, to get more information about the activities and programs that you can participate in on November 18th, GIS Day. Make sure that you check that stuff out. And of course, come and see us here again with the Museum of Natural Sciences. You can follow the museum on social media to get updates about what's happening. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all three. We're at Natural Sciences. And like I said at the top of the show, naturalsciences.org is your source for everything happening at the Museum of Natural Sciences in person and virtually. We're going to be doing a lot of great virtual stuff coming up real soon. In fact, since a few of you are still here on the show, I can let you know that when you tune in to the Science Cafe next Thursday at 7 o'clock, where we're going to be talking about blue crab in North Carolina. If you like seafood, show up for that one. When we talk about blue crab in North Carolina, it won't be called the Science Cafe anymore. Now that we're in this new virtual world, we're going to be changing things up just a little bit with the show. So you'll see a little bit of a new look, feel, and a new name for the program. So next Thursday, 7 o'clock, I hope that you'll join me, host Chris Smith, for Science Tonight. Until then, take care, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. Bye.